Sometimes you need side effects in your form. For example, you have an input and you want to clear it every time you select a different input. This is now possible thanks to this pull request, so make sure to update TanStack Form to the latest version. This is chapter 6 of the TanStack Form tutorial. Don't forget to subscribe. My name is Leonardo and let's begin. First of all, let's try to analyze the code. This is a simple component with a form. The form has 3 fields, and let's start from a really easy side effect. This is a simple text input, and let's say I want to trigger something every time the input changes its value. The API we're going to use is called listeners, and you can find it inside the form.field component. This property accepts an object, and the keys are the 4 events you can listen to trigger your function. We're going to try on change, but the syntax is exactly the same for everyone. And to add a little bit of spice, let's say that our side effect is not defined here in this component, but it is in the parent component. And we're going to see that it doesn't really change anything. Let's get back to our API. We have defined our onChange object, and here we want to define our custom function that is going to represent our side effect. In this case, this is onValueChange, that is a function, as I mentioned, coming from the parent. The function will just print a console log, but the idea is to just show you that it doesn't really matter whatever you put here inside this function. It can be literally everything, even a callback coming from the parent. But let's get back to our example. We do not want to print first name, but instead we want to print the actual value that is being set to this field. And how can we access this value? It is provided here inside the props. So here, if you type value, this is already a super simple example of a working listener. And if I go on the browser, I can find here that, for example, I type my name. Listener is going to print the console log every time I type something on the input. But let's move on to the second example. I want to select a region first, and then I select a province. And if I change the region, I want the province to be reset. Here it seems that it worked, but in fact if I submit, you see that the value of the province is still there. And that's just because this is an input, and by changing the region, I also change the possible options here. In fact, if I go back to the previous region, you will find that the province is already selected. This will be pretty much a bug in our application, so let's see how we can fix it with the new listeners API. Anyway, if you're wondering how I can make the province value change every time I change something on the region selector, this is about reactivity and I'm gonna explain it later. Let's stick to listeners for now. Back to VS Code, we can now move into the region field. This time it is a select, but it isn't much different from the input. And again, inside the field component, we can define our listeners. And once more, we're gonna go with the onChange. This time, we don't really care about the selected value, but we want to do something else. And from our form instance, we can set the field value of province to the empty string. And in fact, with this single change, I can select again a region, I can select a province, and you can find that this is properly set. And now, if I change the region, well, the province is gonna set to empty, and this is thanks to our listeners. There's one more thing I want to show you, which might get useful, for example, if your form is split into multiple components, but not necessarily. Back to the code, this was the region field. Let's move on to the province field. And again, we're gonna define our listeners object, and once more, we're gonna listen to the onChange event. But let's do something slightly different. This time, I want to ask for a window.confirm to ask the user if they're really in that province. But not only that, I also want to display the region here. And it can be as simple as form.getFieldValue and passing region here. But let's say, as I mentioned, that this may be a different component, and I might not get direct access to the form instance. What can I do? And the solution is that there's a second parameter to all the listeners, that is the field API. From the field API, I can access the form, and again, I can get the value. So now what can I do with this confirm? For example, I can save the value, and if it is not confirmed, I can set both field to the empty string. And actually, to be precise, let's take to the example where I do not have direct access to the form, so I can define it this way. And by defining a simple function like this one, I can go back to the browser, select a region, select a province, and this time it's gonna ask, are you really there? If I select OK, the selection is taken. But if I try again and I say cancel, then both values gets removed. And I can prove it again by trying to submit. And the last thing, as promised, is I want to show you how I can change the values available here inside of select every time a different value changes on the form. And to do that, if I go back to the form definition, it is as easy as calling form.useStore and passing a selector of the property I want to subscribe to. Every time the region changes, this value will change, causing a re-render. And if I go back here, you will find that the provinces are exactly the array after selecting the region here into the provinces object that is defined here on top of our file. And if you want to learn more, chapter 4 of this tutorial is everything about subscribing to changes, not only to the values, but actually to anything that can be a slice of the state, so literally whatever part of the form state you want to subscribe to. And speaking about subscribing to form events, you should also subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't already. For any question about TanStack Form, you can reach out to me on the Discord server, you can write a comment here, you can write an issue, there's plenty of way of getting in touch with the team. And that was it for today. I really hope you found this video helpful, thanks for watching and see you in the next one. Bye!